The knock on the saloon door came just as Clayton Briggs was nursing the last swallow of whiskey. He hadn't been expecting anyone, not this late, not in a town where the dust swallowed men's voices by sundown. But the sound came again, sharper this time, followed by the whimper of a child. His hand froze on the glass. He pushed to his feet, boots scraping the wood, heart quickening with a kind of dread he couldn't name. Mail-order bride, he thought. She's here. But when he opened the door, the sight made his gut twist in ways no whiskey could ever calm. A woman stood there, tall, dark-haired, her eyes sharp as cut stone. In one arm she cradled a baby, in the other she clutched a worn leather satchel. Around her skirts clustered 5 children, 2 boys, 3 girls, all staring at him like he was the last tree in a desert. Clayton blinked, gripping the doorframe. "You," he rasped. "You ain't Margaret." The woman's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Margaret is dead," she said flatly. "I'm her sister, Evelyn Wade. She sent me instead. With the children." His mind reeled. Dead? Sent her instead? Clayton had imagined a soft-voiced bride, a woman to fill the silence of his ranch, not this widow with 5 pairs of eyes boring into him. Before he could speak again, one of the boys stepped forward, fists clenched, chin high. "You the man supposed to be pa now?" The words landed like a hammer. Clayton almost laughed, except nothing about the situation was funny. He looked at the woman again. Her face was tired but strong, carved by miles of hardship. The baby squirmed in her arms. "Hold on," he managed, shaking his head. "I wrote for a bride, not a sudden crash cut him off." Behind them, the wagon lurched as one wheel cracked, spilling a chest into the dirt. The children gasped, running back to gather scattered belongings, clothes, a doll, a Bible with torn pages. Evelyn didn't even flinch. "That's everything we have," she said, her voice low. "And the men who followed us will be here before long. So, mister, you can either close the door on us, or you can decide to stand." Clayton's blood iced. "Men?" She nodded once, her eyes scanning the darkening street. "We were tracked all the way from Abilene. Debt collectors. They want me. And they don't care who gets in their way." A shout echoed from down the road, rough voices carried on the wind. Clayton's instinct screamed to slam the door, pretend none of this was his problem. But the children's eyes clung to him, wide with terror, and Evelyn's stare burned through him with something fierce and unyielding. He cursed under his breath and stepped aside. "Inside. All of you." They moved fast, the children herding like skittish calves, Evelyn bringing up the rear. Clayton shut the door, bolting it just as bootsteps echoed outside. The baby whimpered. Evelyn hushed it gently, her voice trembling only slightly. The shadow of a man passed the window. Another followed. Clayton gripped his rifle, every nerve buzzing. He had wanted a bride to soften his loneliness. Instead, he'd been handed a family on the run and a fight he hadn't asked for. But the frontier had never given him what he wanted. Only what he needed. A fist slammed the door. "Open up," a voice barked. "We know she's in there." The children gasped. Evelyn tightened her grip on the baby, her other hand resting on the eldest boy's shoulder. Clayton leveled the rifle at the door, heart hammering. "You brought hell to my doorstep, lady," he muttered. Evelyn's reply was steady, cold. "Hell was already coming. I just gave it a face." The door shuddered under another blow. The children huddled close. Clayton had seconds to decide, fight, or hand her over. But when he glanced at her, standing proud despite the fear in her eyes, the choice became clear. He cocked the rifle. "Then let's see if hell can bleed." The first shot came through the window, shattering glass. Clayton fired back, the crack of his rifle deafening in the small room. Screams erupted outside, followed by gunfire. Evelyn shoved the children behind the table, dropping low as she pulled a pistol from her satchel. Clayton stared, shocked, but she didn't hesitate. She fired through the window, her aim sharp. One man fell. Another cursed, retreating into the shadows. For a moment, silence. Clayton's pulse pounded in his ears. Then a lantern arced through the air, smashing against the wall, flames licking at the wood. Evelyn cursed, grabbing a blanket to smother it. Clayton fired again, forcing the attackers back. Outside, hooves thundered. The men were circling, regrouping. "They'll burn us out," Evelyn hissed, stamping the last ember. Clayton's mind raced. He hadn't asked for this. He hadn't asked for her. But he couldn't let them all die. He turned to the eldest boy, who was trembling but standing tall. "What's your name?" "Daniel," the boy said, voice cracking. Clayton shoved his spare pistol into the boy's hand. "Daniel, you keep your sisters safe. Point and shoot if anyone comes through that door. You understand?" Daniel swallowed hard, nodding. Clayton looked at Evelyn. "You trust me?" Her eyes locked on his, fierce and unblinking. "I don't have the luxury not to." They slipped out the back, into the night. The attackers hadn't expected it. Clayton dropped one in the alley, Evelyn another. They fought like cornered wolves, back to back in the dirt. By the time the dust settled, 3 men lay bleeding and the rest were gone, their hoofbeats fading into the plains. Clayton leaned against the wall, chest heaving. Evelyn stood beside him, smoke and sweat streaking her face, baby still cradled in her arm. For a moment, the world felt unreal. "You fight like a soldier," he muttered. Her jaw tightened. "I was a soldier's wife. Makes you learn quick." Inside, the children rushed to them, clinging to Evelyn's skirts, eyes wide with relief. Daniel held the pistol awkwardly but steady, like a boy who had aged 5 years in one night. Clayton looked at them, 5 children, a widow, and a wagon of broken dreams. He should have sent them on their way. Instead, he found himself saying, "My ranch is 3 miles north. It ain't much, but it's safer than here. You can stay, till you figure where you're headed." Evelyn studied him, suspicion and gratitude warring in her gaze. Finally, she nodded. "Then we'll stand with you." Clayton didn't know why he'd said it, or why his chest burned with something more than fear. But he knew one thing, his life had just been turned inside out, and nothing would ever be the same. The ride to the ranch was tense, every shadow a threat. The children were silent, too tired and shaken to speak. Evelyn never once let the baby go, her eyes scanning the horizon like a hawk. When they reached the ranch, the house loomed small and weathered against the endless plains. Evelyn stepped down first, her face unreadable. "This is it?" "This is it," Clayton said, almost defensive. She gave no judgment, only gathered the children toward the door. Inside, the space was sparse, 1 table, 1 bed, a fireplace that smoked too much. The children looked around uncertainly, until the youngest girl squealed at sight of a wooden horse on the shelf. She clutched it to her chest like treasure. Evelyn glanced at Clayton, her voice softer than before. "They'll make do." He nodded stiffly, but inside something shifted. He had lived years in silence, his house echoing like a tomb. Now, in one night, it was filled with life. Too much life. As he set down his rifle, a cold realization settled over him. Those men weren't finished. And if Evelyn was right, they weren't just chasing her, they were hunting. Which meant this house, his land, his quiet life, none of it was safe anymore. The baby whimpered. Evelyn hushed it, rocking gently. For the first time, Clayton saw the cracks in her armor, the exhaustion in her shoulders, the weight of carrying so many lives alone. And against every instinct, he felt something rise in him. Not pity. Not regret. Responsibility. Outside, a wolf howled, long and low. The children froze. Evelyn met his eyes, her voice calm but heavy. They'll come again. Clayton tightened his jaw. Then we'll be ready. The first days on the ranch passed in a blur of tension. Clayton rose before dawn, scanning the horizon for riders, while Evelyn worked with steady precision, organizing the children like a general marshalling troops. She scrubbed, cooked, mended, and even fixed the broken hinge on the barn door. The children followed her orders without question, though Clayton noticed their eyes kept straying to him, wary and testing, as if waiting for him to prove whether he was friend or foe. He tried to keep his distance. Tried. But distance was impossible when 5 pairs of boots clattered across his porch, when small hands tugged at his sleeve asking if they could feed the chickens, when Evelyn's voice filled the rooms he had once believed hollow. On the third night, Clayton awoke to the faint creak of a floorboard. His hand went to the pistol at his side. He crept into the main room, only to find Daniel by the window, clutching the spare pistol, his eyes locked on the dark fields outside. "You hear something?" Clayton whispered. The boy's face was pale but steady. "I thought I saw a firelight." Clayton joined him, squinting into the night. For a long moment, nothing. Then, faintly, a glow flickered against the horizon. A campfire. Too close. "They're watching," Clayton muttered. Daniel's grip tightened on the pistol. "I'll shoot if they come." Clayton rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Not yet. Your job is to keep your sisters safe. Mine's to bleed if it comes to that." The boy hesitated, then nodded, his jaw tight. For a moment, Clayton saw himself at that age, before war and whiskey, before loneliness had stripped him to bone and grit. By morning, the fire was gone. But the tracks in the dirt told the story clear. Riders had circled the ranch, then vanished east. Watching. Waiting. Evelyn listened without flinching. "They'll test your resolve," she said, feeding the baby. "They'll try to starve us out or scare us into running." Clayton frowned. "And if we don't run?" Her gaze met his, unyielding. "Then they'll kill us." Silence stretched between them. The baby cooed. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters. "Why'd you come here?" Clayton asked finally, his voice low. "You knew they'd follow. You could have gone anywhere." Evelyn's eyes darkened. "Margaret wrote about you. Said you were stubborn, honest, a man who kept his word. I gambled on that being true." She looked at the children, then back at him. "For their sake, I had to gamble on someone." Clayton felt the weight of her words settle like a stone in his gut. He had asked for a bride to ease his solitude. Instead, he had been handed a war. That evening, while fixing the corral fence, Clayton heard laughter, bright, unguarded. He turned to see the children chasing each other through the grass, Evelyn watching with the faintest smile. The sight caught him off guard. For years his land had been silent, broken only by wind and crows. Now it was alive. And dangerous. That night, the attack came. It started with fire, torches hurled onto the barn roof. Flames roared to life, animals screaming inside. Clayton bolted from the house, rifle in hand, shouting for Daniel to stay with the girls. Evelyn was already there, thrusting the baby into her eldest daughter's arms and grabbing a bucket. Together, she and Clayton fought the fire, smoke choking their lungs. Shots rang out from the shadows, men firing from horseback, their faces masked by scarves. Clayton dropped one rider, reloaded, and fired again. Evelyn, coughing, hurled sand onto the flames, her hair glinting red in the firelight. A bullet whistled past her, splintering wood. Clayton swore, covering her with fire until the attackers pulled back, retreating into the darkness. The barn smoldered but stood. The cattle were spooked, one injured. Evelyn collapsed onto the dirt, coughing, the baby wailing inside the house. Clayton knelt beside her, chest heaving. "You all right?" She nodded, wiping soot from her face. "They won't stop." "No," he admitted. "They won't." For the first time, her hand brushed his, just a fleeting touch, but enough to send a spark through his veins. The next morning, Clayton saddled his horse. "I'm riding to town," he said. "See what I can learn." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "It's a trap. They'll be waiting." "Then I'll spring it," he replied, tightening the cinch. "Better me than them." He nodded toward the children. She stepped closer, her voice low. "Don't make me bury another man." The words stopped him cold. For a moment, he almost faltered. Almost. But then he mounted up and rode. Town was quieter than usual, the saloon half empty, men watching him with guarded eyes. He learned fast, the men hunting Evelyn weren't mere debt collectors. They were Pinkertons, hired by a railroad baron with a claim against her late husband. Some spoke of missing bonds, others of stolen land deeds. Whatever the truth, the price on her head was enough to make hard men restless. Clayton left town with a bounty notice tucked inside his coat. Evelyn Wade. Wanted for fraud and theft. Reward, $500. Dead or alive. When he showed it to her, she didn't flinch. "It's lies," she said simply, rocking the baby. "My husband invested in that railroad. When he died, they came for everything. I ran because I had to. For them." She looked at the children, her jaw hard. "I won't apologize for surviving." Clayton studied her, searching for doubt, for cracks. But all he saw was steel. That night, as the children slept, he sat on the porch cleaning his rifle. Evelyn joined him, settling into the chair beside him, exhaustion in every line of her face. For a long time, they said nothing. The stars stretched endless above them, cold and bright. Finally, Evelyn spoke. "I know you didn't ask for this. Any of it." Clayton's mouth twisted. "Life don't much care what I ask." She glanced at him, eyes softer now. "Then why haven't you sent us away?" He looked at her, really looked. At the strength in her, the fire, the fear she carried but never showed the children. And at the way, despite everything, her presence made his house feel less like a tomb. "Because," he said slowly, "for the first time in years, I got something worth fighting for." Silence hung between them, heavier than words. Evelyn turned back to the stars, her lips pressing together. But she didn't move away. Days turned to weeks. The children settled into ranch life, laughing more freely, their fear loosening like dust in the wind. Daniel shadowed Clayton, learning to ride, to shoot, to mend fences. The girls helped Evelyn with chores, their voices filling the house with songs. But the threat never left. Each sunrise carried the possibility of riders cresting the horizon, each night the fear of fire in the dark. Then came the betrayal. It was Daniel who spotted him first, a rider at the fence line, waving a white cloth. Clayton rode out to meet him, rifle across his saddle. The man was young, nervous, a local hand from town. "They're coming," the man stammered. 10 riders, maybe more. "Tonight." "Why tell me?" Clayton asked, narrowing his eyes. The man swallowed. "Because I seen the kids. Ain't right, what they're planning." Clayton rode back fast, warning Evelyn. She gathered the children, eyes sharp. "We can't fight 10 men, she said. "Not alone." "We won't," Clayton answered grimly. "We'll make a stand they won't forget." They worked through the day, digging trenches, setting traps, barricading the house. Daniel helped, determination hardening his young face. Evelyn moved like a storm, her fear hidden beneath a mask of resolve. As dusk fell, the riders came. Torches burning, guns gleaming. Clayton and Evelyn stood side by side at the porch, rifles ready, the children hidden below in the cellar. The leader called out, voice booming. Hand over the woman, and no blood need spill. Clayton's answer was a bullet that shattered the man's torch. The night erupted in gunfire. The battle was chaos, horses screaming, bullets whistling, men shouting. Clayton fought with every ounce of grit, Evelyn at his side, firing with deadly aim. Daniel, from the cellar hatch, covered the rear, his shots wild but brave. One rider broke through, crashing toward the porch. Evelyn met him head-on, driving her knife into his chest before he could fire. Another came from behind, but Clayton dropped him with a shot to the gut. By dawn, the ground was littered with bodies. The survivors fled, leaving their dead behind. Smoke curled from the grass, blood soaking the earth. Clayton staggered, bleeding from a graze along his arm. Evelyn rushed to him, her hands trembling as she pressed a cloth to the wound. "You fool," she whispered, tears streaking her soot-stained face. "You could have died." He caught her wrist, his voice raw. "So could you." For a moment, they simply stared at each other, the air thick with smoke and something unspoken. Then, without thinking, Clayton pulled her close, their foreheads touching. "We ain't safe yet," he murmured. "No," she breathed. "But we're alive." And in that fragile dawn, surrounded by ashes and ruin, something stronger than fear took root between them. Not just survival. Not just necessity. But the beginning of a bond forged in fire and blood. Weeks later, when the law finally came riding, they found the ranch scarred but standing. Evelyn told her story, Clayton standing beside her, his rifle across his back. The railroad's lies unraveled under scrutiny, the bounty withdrawn. Life slowly returned to rhythm. Cattle grazed, fences mended, the children's laughter bright as spring. And on a quiet evening, as the sun sank over the plains, Evelyn stood beside Clayton on the porch. "You never did get the bride you ordered," she said, a hint of wryness in her voice. Clayton looked at her, at the children chasing fireflies in the dusk, at the woman who had turned his solitude into something fierce and alive. "No," he said softly. "I got something better." And for the first time in years, he smiled, not the weary smile of a man enduring, but the true smile of a man who had found his place. His family. His fight. His home. The frontier stretched wide before them, full of danger, full of promise. But whatever came next, they would face it together.